the U.S. government has blown up another Venezuelan drug boat, this time saying that they were totally carrying drugs, definitely for surezies this time. But is it increasingly looking like the U.S. is just sort of bombing randos for no reason? Just how do we know this was really a drug operation? And is this even serving U.S. strategic interests? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's talk about the administration's war on Venezuelan drug traffickers. So, this is according to the US president, who says, listen, guys, we destroyed another Venezuelan drug boat, killing 3 people this time. He says that the Venezuelan drug vessel was traveling in international waters on the way to the US. He said that 3 men were killed in the attack and that they were violent drug trafficking cartels. He, of course, was a little scant on evidence that the boat was carrying drugs, but this is not itself that unusual because, again, sometimes US intelligence, by showing what they know, they oftentimes would also unveil sources and methods that would mean that, like, for example, let's say they had a source inside the cartel. If they knew the names or people on the boat, they might out that source. So that itself is not unusual. Of course, Nicolas Maduro and the Caracas government said this was U.S. aggression and called Marco Rubio the Lord of Death and War, which is actually like pretty sick. That's a badass name. And we all know Marco Rubio isn't even the Lord of the Department of State. Right? That, of course, title is Benjamin Netanyahu. So you see, we've seen more and more of the U.S. deploying its warships and even some F-35s to the Caribbean, doing counter-narcotics operations. And this is Trump's actual statement. He says, this morning, on my orders, capital O, U.S. military forces conducted a second kinetic strike against positively identified, extraordinarily violent drug trafficking cartels and narco-terrorists in the Southcom area of responsibility. Someone else wrote this because on order is a military term, Southcom area of responsibility. This, for the first time, I think, ever in a Trump tweet, he actually gets capitalization wrong. Area of responsibility, Southcom area of responsibility is a proper noun. There's a bunch of other weird, grammatically nonsensical shit, right? Like a kinetic strike. Guys, all strikes are kinetic. There's no non-kinetic strike, okay? But he also uses the term positively identified. And I want you guys to just put a pin in that for a second. We're going to talk about it. Trump continues. This strike was confirmed while these confirmed narco-terrorists from Venezuela were in international waters transporting illegal narcotics, which is a weapon poisoning Americans, headed to the U.S. These extremely violent drug trafficking cartels pose a threat to U.S. national security, foreign policy, and vital U.S. interests. Strike results in 3 male terrorists killed in action. No U.S. forces were harmed in the strike. If you're transporting drugs and kill Americans, we are hunting you. The illicit activities by these cartels have brought devastating consequences on American communities for decades and killing millions of American citizens. I don't think that's the right number. I think it's like hundreds of thousands. It doesn't matter. If someone's killing 100,000 American citizens, yeah, like, we should take action. But I think there's some of the key points here. And the one I want to point out most strikingly is this positive identification. This is an unusual drop because what this is in Afghanistan, we had what was called the ROE, or the Rules of Engagement. And because it was so bad in a counterinsurgency to kill civilians, to unwittingly kill civilians, that the rule was that you had to have positive ID on a combatant. What does positive ID mean? Well, it means that you cannot infer the location of an enemy, right? You have to have actual visual identification of the enemy's location and activities. So, as they say, if, let's say, someone shoots at you with an AK, they go, pow, 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 and they dive into a house, you can't shoot the house, right? Let's say someone shoots you with an AK, pow, 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 pow. They dive under a wall. They crawl for a little bit, and they pop up. But wait, they're holding a shovel now. They're a farmer. You've lost positive ID, okay? You have to have affirmative identification of an enemy, right? And it doesn't have to be, you have to see the dude, right? A muzzle flash in your direction of shots coming at you, that is sufficient positive identification. And so this produced some outcomes that U.S. soldiers thought were fucking insane. For example, you would have a dude sitting there filming you on a cell phone camera 100 feet away, and then you would roll over an IED and get blown up. And the cell phone camera guy would, like, beep, get his video, put his cell phone in his pocket, and just bebop away. And we'd be like, That dude knew we were going to get blown up. He was recording us as it happened. He was just standing there. He's obviously a combatant. And they'd be like, no positive ID, buddy, right? Or you'd even see somebody who was like the trigger man for the IED. And you'd go, well, you better, maybe he was just calling his mom at the moment you blew up. So positive ID is really an annoyingly high standard. And obviously we lost in Afghanistan, so soldiers were right. Trying to kill an enemy by not killing them is kind of preposterous, right? But the problem is that this is also a reference to the senior Democratic senator who was briefed by DOD staff on the previous strike on the boat in the Caribbean, right? Particularly, this was Senator Jack Reed of the Senate Armed Services Committee. Now, as we talked about, the U.S., we don't publicly disclose some info that could unveil sources and methods about strikes. But what we do to ensure there's some level of democratic accountability, right? Because the Constitution mandates that all acts of war, all war must be approved by Congress. And Congress has all these requirements that they've imposed. And so part of these requirements are met by the Senate and House receiving classified briefings behind closed doors about any kind of military action taken. And what Senator Reed said is, quote, the administration, they, have offered no positive ID that the boat was Venezuelan, nor that its crew were members of Tren de Aragua or any other cartel, right? The briefers also acknowledged they didn't know exactly where the targets were headed, and this was essentially confirmed by Marco Rubio. Trump said that this boat was en route to the U.S., which is obviously absurd because you can look, it's a little skiff. It's obviously not going to make it to the U.S. Marco Rubio said initially, quote, these particular drugs were probably headed to Trinidad or some other country in the Caribbean, at which point they just contribute to the instability those countries are facing, right? There's other sources that said actually they thought the boat might have been turning around, and again, whether it posed an immediate threat to the U.S. and whether these people were even combatants. And so this is all pretty fraught. Now, this is why the president is really doubling down on this. We had positive ID. Well, we had positive ID that they were a boat from Venezuela, but there's some other, like, this is not one of these things that's the Trump administration's original sin, right? Let's see if I can find this here. So I think actually one of these problems is, I believe it's, let's see. Actually, I don't think this is the right guy. Obama. Let's see. Let's see. This is important. This is important enough. There we go. Okay. I had his name wrong. This is the story of Anwar al-Awlaki. Now, Anwar al-Awlaki is he is a problem. He is essentially a bad case study. So he died September 30th, 2011 at age 40 in Yemen. He was killed by a drone strike, and he was a pretty active terrorist, right? He supported terrorism. He was an Islamic fundamentalist, but he was also the child of a Yemeni scholar and politician, current serving actually agriculture minister of Yemen. But he was born, crucially, in 1971 in Las Cruces, New Mexico. So this guy was an American citizen. And he was killed by a drone strike in Yemen. But here's where things are fraught. Because he was not a combatant. And this was ordered by President Obama. And he was the first U.S. citizen targeted and assassinated by a government drone strike. And they said he was a key organizer for Al-Qaeda. But this is where things get pretty weird. Is that by organizer, they mostly mean he made propaganda, right? Now, he was radicalized. He had some vicious ideas. He was linked to Nidal Hassan, the perpetrator of the 2009 Fort Hood shooting, right? Was linked to another guy who tried to detonate a bomb on an airline. Like, he was not a good dude. Now, the U.S., right? The Yemeni government tried him in absentia for plotting to kill foreigners and being a member of al-Qaeda, but ultimately he was put on a kill list by Barack Obama, and he essentially had his civil liberties unilaterally revoked. Again, not because he was a combatant. He never held a weapon. It wasn't even clear he was doing organizing. Instead, he appeared to just be a propagandist, right? He wrote essays. He was made YouTube videos. This is all like he wasn't a good person, and he was affiliated with some of the worst terrorists of the era. But he was an American citizen who was just killed in a drone strike because the American government was like, we think you're a terrorist. It's a lot of work to have to try you as a combatant. And so we're going to just kill you. And so the problem is, again, we've talked about this in other videos. The dangerous thing you do when you play these kind of games, and President Obama, this was his. He owns this. The dangerous thing is that when you do this, when you go, listen, this dude, he was friends with every major terrorist. He is like clearly deeply involved with these terror organizations. And sure, he himself isn't picking up a weapon or planning a bomb, but he's so involved. And yeah, he's an American citizen, but he's living in Yemen, and the Yemeni government really wants him. So they say, let's just fucking kill him. Let's just kill him. Let's just get rid of this dude. But the problem is that when you do this, here we are 15 years later, and you have the president using the same basic rhetoric. Well, we decided these guys are terrorists. We don't really know who they are, but we know who they're not. We know they're terrorists. And yeah, they weren't holding a weapon, or they weren't like firing a gun. They didn't really threaten U.S. forces. It's not even clear they were going to the United States. But we still just think we're allowed to kill them because we called them terrorists. And Congress has passed an authorization for use of military force. It says, listen, if someone's a terrorist, the American military can go after them wherever they are. And so once you call them a terrorist, you can then go ahead and kill them. And so that policy now feels like it's a little bit kind of biting us in the butt. And the other issue is that, they say, okay, this is a, that this is a pressing issue, that these Venezuelan drug cartels are huge. But here's from the DEA's website. This is their National Drug Threat Assessment in 2024. Okay. So fentanyl is the deadliest drug in America. It killed 40,000 Americans the first 6 months of 2023 alone. Right. But these originate, again, they say Mexican cartels profit by producing these synthetic drugs like fentanyl and methamphetamine that are not subject to the same production challenges as plant-based drugs. So Trump's own DEA says, well, they're mostly Mexican-based. In fact, they name the cartels that produce these things. They say it's Sinaloa and Jalisco Nueva Generacion, right? They are the main criminal organizations in Mexico and the most dangerous. But this is sort of key. And they also engage in migrant smuggling, sex trafficking, bribery, extortion, and a host of other crimes, extending the reach of drug markets. In fact, I'm going to see if we can even find... There's no mention in this document at all of Tren de Aragua. Is there any mention of Venezuela? Oh my gosh. Nothing. No mention in the DEA's own report. Trump's own DEA says these guys are producing so little of the drugs that come into the country, they are a rounding error. And so, again, what I think is the takeaway here is that this isn't even like these terrorists who are like hubs of networks, right? Who are major contributors. This is an ancillary organization that the president has just sort of said, well, they're terrorists because they're doing drugs. They're moving drugs. And I get it. There's narco terrorists, but those are groups like FARC who say, listen, we have a political violence wing that wants to perform the leftist revolution in Colombia. And then we also have a drug manufacturing wing that funds our operation. This is the narco-terrorism. Narcotics fund the terrorism. And that's just not true. That's just not how this is working. Tren de Aragua is a money-making operation, perhaps through the Venezuelan government, but tiny in scale, so small that, again, the Secretary of State was like, we couldn't even find a boat that was going to the U.S. from Venezuela. We literally couldn't find it. So we just killed a boat going to Trinidad. And so the fear that you have is that, again, this is the continuation of an existing policy. And that's a policy that says that the president can kill anyone they want outside the United States. Again, it started with Obama saying, we're just going to kill this one really nasty American. Sure, he still has civil rights, but he's in Yemen. Who's going to know? And then that expanded and expanded and expanded. And now we go, hey, if you're a boat moving from Venezuela in international waters, we'll just fucking kill you. And like, again, this isn't me being like drugs are good. Drugs are bad. U.S. Coast Guard should interdict and seize those drugs, search the ship, and arrest and charge the criminals that are doing it. If someone's committing a crime, I don't know, arrest them. Just a thought. You can't just kill people you don't like. I don't know. That's just not the American way, right? That's all I had, guys. Appreciate you. Hit subscribe. Do you guys want to help the Ukrainians defend Kramatorsk in the east? Well, Ukraine ADOPS has partnered with the best brigades in the Ukrainian military to hold the line in the east. They need drones. They need antennas. They need everything we can get them to keep the Russians at bay. So that's what we're doing. We're working with Ukraine ADOPS for their Fortress Kramatorsk fundraiser. And best of all, there's an anonymous donor who has said he will match, or she, I don't know, will match up to $300,000 of donations. So every dollar we raise for them is going to be another dollar from our anonymous donor. So if you want to help out the 93rd, the 25th, Azov, the 79th, the 82nd, and the Boys of Liu, most of which I've met actually, you want to click the link in the description and get the fundraiser. Plus, they give you guys some sweet hookups. $250 get you a patch of the Kramatorsk Patrol Police, which is pretty sick. And 2 get you actually that patch plus patch from Corvus, the Corvus drone unit of the 93rd. These are literally some of the best drone pilots in the entire Ukrainian military. You can see honestly, I think it's just badass that their official unit patch has a quadcopter drone. I actually had, when I came back, a friend of all the patches I was given. One of my buddies was like, that is the coolest patch I've ever seen. So check it out. The link's in the description. And of course, a huge thank you to our Colonel tier members, guys like Yanko, Georgiev, Bastian, Himmerling, Michael Fry, Christian Schumann, Chris Holmes, Deborah Oppenheimer, and all of our Lieutenant tier members. We couldn't do it without you. Hit that subscribe. See you in the next one. Cheers.